What's up, guys? It's Jay here. So, for those of you that have been following my journey, I have recently just rebranded my agency and am looking at starting a new one, or I have. And I'm a big believer in getting people's advice who are a bit further down the road than me. Now, today's guest is about 3, 4 years younger than me, but he's much further down the road than me. I'm joined with Jarod Spiewak today. Spiewak. I hope I'm saying that right. And awesome guy. I mean, he started off at about $5 an hour. I think it was on Upwork, writing SEO content for pennies. And now he owns a 6-figure agency. So I'm quite excited about this. Here's Jarod. Hey, Jarod, how's it going, man?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for accepting and being able to chat to me. I've been following you a while. Back when you were on Upwork even, or if you were even followable then.
Yeah, it's been a while.
So how could you maybe just tell everyone like how you got started, how you got into this? I mean, to choose SEO is like quite a crazy thing to do. I think only crazy people do SEO, or it's like a very dark arts type skill you need to learn. So you must have been, how did you get into it? And then how did you come to where you are today, basically?
Yeah, so let me try and give you the quick rundown, which is that I got started when I was 14. I was a freshman in high school, and I was a CD student. For anyone that doesn't understand the American education system, it's not going to mean much to you, but basically underperforming student, and I decided I was going to graduate early. So I started college at 15, graduated high school at 16, and one of the things that I did in order to pay for that is I went online, like a bunch of people do every single month. I just searched for how to make money online, and I found websites that I could write content on for about a penny a word, often less. So I was writing on there for a while, and this was back in 2012. So this introduced me to the concept of SEO, because this is just spammy keyword stuffed SEO content. From there, I went to college for my marketing degree, and I ended up getting a corporate marketing job. So I worked corporate America for real estate for a little while, a little over a year, realized that corporate America wasn't for me. And then once I realized that, I signed up for Upwork, in which I started offering my services for $5 an hour, because I just couldn't get hired on there when I placed myself any higher than that. I just wasn't getting any progress. I did that because I thought I was going to just use those skills to leverage to get a job somewhere else. So anyways, long story short, eventually that leads to me getting a full-time job offer from a marketing agency to join their SEO team. I became their lead SEO strategist. This really cemented me within the world of SEO, where prior I was just kind of doing kind of anything when it comes to marketing. And then I went from full-time down to part-time, eventually to no time at that agency. And I was sitting there at making about $20,000 in monthly recurring revenue as a freelancer, going, okay, great. What is next for me? So the most logical transition was to go from a freelancer to an agency. Now, unfortunately, at that time, I had done a lot of things wrong. And so because of that, I was completely overwhelmed and overworked. So I went from 20,000 in monthly recurring revenue in November of 2017, I believe, to 3,000 in monthly recurring revenue by February 2018, which is when I fired a bunch of clients because I wasn't happy with a lot of things, and a lot of clients fired me because they weren't happy with a lot of things. And so I essentially, when I was like, okay, great, now we're starting an agency, relatively from scratch from there, at least from the client basis. And then that was Blue Dog Media. For the first year, just focused on SEO. The second year started introducing Google Ads PPC. The third year was very much so focused on PPC, because I really wanted to scale that and kind of, dare I say, perfect that. And then I also made the decision around year 2 to rebrand, which we worked on during year 3, and we officially launched internally in January this year, publicly either June or July of this year. I can't remember when that video actually came out, but we rebranded from Blue Dog Media, which was just doing SEO, to Comet Fuel, which publicly offers SEO and Google Ads PPC.
Okay, awesome. So that was like the super condensed, super like quick story of Jarod Spiewak. Am I saying it correctly still? I don't think I am, mate.
Yeah. No, you're good.
And so I just want to like kind of pull it back a bit. And so when you were working on Upwork, did you ever have that was obviously quite a while ago, but did you always have that vision of owning an agency? Because there's obviously a lot of freelancers in that, you go out, you Google how everyone starts this way, how to make money online, top earning digital marketing skills. And then would you say that's like a natural transition everyone follows? And if you could have done anything differently, would you have?
Yeah, so I don't think it was in my I guess you could say proximity for a while. Like I was certainly interested in owning my own business for a long
Yeah.
time. I just never thought I'd actually do it. Mostly, I would say mostly out of fear more than anything. I was very conservative in my risk taking as well as my willingness to kind of put myself out there. So when I signed up initially for Upwork, the goal was to essentially gain skills to get hired in other places. Because I don't know how it is everywhere in the world, but in the States, oftentimes you're trying to get a marketing job. They want 5 to 8 years of experience. They want
Yeah.
you to have oftentimes your master's, which is your MBA,
Yeah.
even for a
Yeah.
fairly low paying job. And so I was having a really hard time getting actual interviews. And when I did go to interviews, what I wanted to have was a portfolio so that when they were hiring other people that were, just out of school, they were like, okay, great. This other guy actually has real world experience, so on and so forth. So a lot of it was to try and get a job somewhere else, which is essentially what happened when I got that full time offer from an SEO agency. And then I think over time, what I did while I was still working for that agency, I just became completely enveloped, I guess you could say, within the world of SEO. So I was reading everything I could and I wanted to implement all that, but not all the skills and tactics were relevant to the types of clients I was working with at that agency. And so I would take on other agencies as clients oftentimes, or direct clients themselves, so I could start to implement some of that. So over time, I just kind of gained a lot more confidence in doing stuff for myself at a certain scale. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
the reason why the monthly recurring revenue was so high while I was still employed somewhere else was just because I was, quite afraid to make that transition. Even when I was at, 20,000 monthly recurring revenue, I still didn't feel as though that I still wasn't comfortable and felt as though that was high enough to not be working for somebody else, just because I was so unsure of myself and so afraid. When it comes to what I would have done differently, I either say one of two things, depending on how I'm feeling that day. I either say that I would have jump shipped earlier, and I would have gone on my own full time, much faster. The other side of things, I say I would have actually waited longer, because on one hand, I was financially ready, and I could have gotten that essentially a faster start. On the other
Yeah.
hand, there were certain skills that I just developed over time that I didn't pay too much attention to, such as like what is the actual pitch and proposal process that we're going through that agency, because it was a fairly small agency, and I knew and I was friends with the CEO and a lot of other heads of other departments that were there. It was about 40, maybe 50 people so total with the company, and it was small enough that you knew everybody. So I would have been
Yeah.
in a position and had the ability to basically sit in and go, hey, I want to sit on some sales calls this week, and no one would have had an issue with that. So on one hand, I wish I would have paid a little bit more attention to some of those areas, but I genuinely don't believe that I would have had nearly as easy as a transition process if I didn't have experience working for an agency before just starting my own.
Wow. Yeah. So a lot of the guys watching this now, because I'm kind of documenting the process, I'm in not similar boat than you, where I had an agency that was a bit different. I sort of did everyone and everything, like websites, pay-per-click, Google ads, social media advertising, everything. And then I got on board with a mentor who actually said to me, no, you need to niche down and specialize in very specific things. What is your view on that? Or am I asking, what's your view
Yeah.
on that?
So to niche or not to niche, that's it's the question that everybody has. In my personal point of view, I think starting off with a niche is pretty stupid. The reason being is that you're just taking a complete guess and you're hoping for the best. You're assuming that
Yeah.
that's a service that you want to offer. You're assuming that that's a client base that you want to work with. You're assuming that that's a price point that you want to be at. I don't think that there's an issue with niching down, but what I noticed was that for a lot of companies that are incredibly niche, like they're the SEO for dentists, or they're the PPC company for personal injury attorneys, or whatever it may be, is that oftentimes those companies, if you look at what their founders say about how they got started, oftentimes you see either one of two things. Either they worked in that industry previously, so they were a
Yeah.
lawyer, or they were a dentist, so they worked in the medical field, or they just it was just happenstance that they came into that. It was like, we got a lawyer that we had a bunch of different clients in a bunch of different areas. One of them just happened to be a lawyer. That lawyer just happened to give us 2 or 3 referrals. And then one of those referrals just happened to be the head of the local association for lawyers. And so because of that, they let us speak at an event. And then we got so it's just happened by chance. Like it naturally developed. And it's like, oh, that makes sense. So a lot of the times what I haven't seen is companies that just choose out of a hat randomly, like, oh, like this sounds like a good niche, or oh, what happened to my camera? That's odd. That's fine. I'll work on that. I'll just switch camera here. But anyways, so a lot of the time it was people who were essentially just kind of going through and choosing. Turn this off. There we go. And just over time, just happening to get into a certain realm rather than just choosing from the start. And so, in my opinion, I think it makes more sense to try things out, see what you like, and then dive deeper on that. So for me, for instance, I started off doing just about any marketing service you can imagine. Once I was on Upwork, I was not really writing content besides, within the context of SEO, but I was doing SEO, I was running ads, email marketing, I was building some websites, so on and so forth. So what happened is over time, I was like, oh, I really like this SEO stuff. And so I just started taking on more and more of that. And it just naturally focused on that because that's where my interest was. I enjoyed it as a service. Then when it came to industry, I ended up working for a law firm marketing agency. That was the type of agency that I was working for. So it was a very niche agency, which they basically had the same story as before. They just happened to end up working with a lot of lawyers, and so they niched down for that.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of experience working for lawyers. So when I started my own agency, I was like, okay, I actually want to work with contractors because my personal client base at the time was a lot of contractors. But then over time, more and more lawyers started reaching out to me where like 60% of what we were making was for lawyers. So I was like, okay, great. Lawyers and contractors. Lawyers were coming to me inbound, contractors I was getting through like outbound or whatever it may be. So that I was like, okay, great. Now that makes sense. But then over time, it just kind of evolved to service-based businesses as different things came in, especially as we started working with some national companies, which then made it so we couldn't work within those niches for any other company within that niche, so on and so forth. So I'm not against niching down. I do think you have to figure out what's right for you, but the niches can be a lot more defined than just the service and the industry. You can define your niche by like the size of business, the skills of the business. Because even if you work with, and I know just kind of waterfalling at this point, but you can work with like personal injury lawyers. There's a big difference between a personal injury firm that is a single lawyer. Maybe they also have a paralegal. Maybe they have a front desk person that's also working with them. Maybe a case manager or two. That size firm versus a firm with 20 to 30 lawyers with an in-house marketing team. The way that you provide services for one is going to be completely different from the way that you provide services for the other. And that's sure, they both fall within the niche of lawyers or personal injury lawyers or whatever, but the way that you actually work with each of them is going to be completely different.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So yeah, we've been chatting a bit on LinkedIn as well, and I kind of reached out to you because I noticed you as one of the younger guys in the industry that's really killing it at the moment. And you said to me, and I loved what you said. You said, be careful of watching a lot of these like gurus online and stuff because they're just all trying to, let's say, push a particular course or push a particular agenda onto you and that. And you actually said, Jay, if you want to learn about something, say like sales, for instance, don't go learn it from a digital marketing guy. Go and actually watch some sales videos. I mean, go read from like proper sales guys whose job it was to sell, if I'm not mistaken, or go read about accounting and educate yourself on financial processes and stuff like that. So I just kind of wanted to chat about maybe some of your processes because that's currently what I'm struggling with now. I mean, I've got all these like inbound clients and stuff, and I'm like, shit, I need to get my processes in place. I need onboarding, the whole process, the whole workflow of everything else, and like that. So, and I know you also said to me you're quite big into automations and that, and I'm busy getting jacked up on automations in the back end as we speak, and that's just a rabbit hole. Oh my word, that's like the biggest rabbit hole right now for me. So I don't know, maybe if you could comment on like some of your processes and stuff like that.
Yeah, so something that I found really interesting with processes, and I think this is one of the things that where I used to pay really close attention to how everything was being run within the agency world. I was paying attention to basically everyone that like owned an agency that I thought was kind of doing cool stuff, what they were saying. There's very few courses that I didn't take just to see, what are they saying, what's their approach, whatever it may be. But what I found was that a lot of the time the information just simply wasn't, in my opinion, all that great or all that applicable, or that most of the time it was just information that they themselves learned from other resources that were just, a course specifically on that subject or a couple books on that subject, and then
Just
they
spun a
implemented
different
what
way.
was there. Yeah, and then sure, you might be getting the perspective of like from the agency, but you're just getting their fairly narrow perspective, if you will. So on the point of processes, one thing that I felt like I was failing at was because I didn't have a ton of them built out, where everything wasn't like in a very accessible, like step-by-step basis, which is what everyone was saying that you need to do. Like, oh, like, don't you remember what the E-Myth said? Everything needs to have a specific process, which is a book that I have a really big love-hate relationship with. And then I started just listening through podcasts and just listening and reading books by other entrepreneurs, people that have started and founded and taken companies public, or are on paper. You can see that this was $100 million company, and this other company that you've heard of actually acquired this company for. It's all public record, and they're like, oh yeah, so like. And they're like, yeah, like most businesses start thinking about processes, like trying to like $1 million in revenue. And like, if you have like more than 50, 60 SOPs, like that's a lot of SOPs. And I'm like, wait a second. Like, I'm pretty sure I have like 50 SOPs for like a Google Analytics audit. Like, what the hell are you talking about? And then, it's kind of, and it's like, oh, like, wait a second. That's because in most other industries, everybody doesn't outsource everything to $3 to $5 VAs for work that should be done by people making, $30 to $50 an hour. So that was one of the things, is that when it comes to processes and systems, they're a lot, at least the way that I do it on our end. It also depends on who what your team is, but it's a lot less step by step as much as it's checklists. So the way that I'm currently building out, because I'm currently restructuring how they are under the new brand, is right now I have a if I could share it, I would, because I don't really care, but I can't. So it's essentially a slide deck which goes through the entire process end to end, from marketing to a client canceling, which is just like 10 points, which is like we get them somehow, like who knows, they become a SQL or sales qualified lead. Then we go through a discovery process, then we go through an audit process, then we go through a proposal process, and then it's then there's a new client setup, which is just like we have internal documents that's just like, oh yeah, this client, this budget, or setting up their email stuff. So just like whenever anybody emails me, it automatically gets tagged for who it is and whatnot. So setting that up, and then the actual new client, which is our initial process that we go through with people, always on the Google Ads side of things, and then so building it out, then management, and then eventually they cancel. So basically those 10 things, or roughly 10 or so, is everything that happens. And then on this slide deck, you click on one of them and just brings you to the next slide, which would be, let's say, the proposal process. And then there's 3 steps from there, which would be like creating the... Actually, is there one before that? Off the top of my head, it's harder to do, but it's like we need to actually like get all the information that we need to customize the proposal from the template. Then we need to actually create the proposal itself, and then we send them the email being like, "Hey, it's ready." We do everything through screen share, so like here's the link, etc. So those are 3 steps within that. And then within each of those, it just opens up the Word document, which is just bullet points essentially, which is just like, okay, this is the information that we need to know in order to create the proposal. Like we need to understand their situation, which we should have gotten through the discovery and onboarding process, the discovery and audit process. So we should have notes, like go to that document, create like, 3 to 4 paragraphs to explain it so that we can go over it live, determine pricing. And then I just have some like notes, like how I do that. It's not very refined because it's mostly in my head, like, oh, that makes sense in my head, but I'm slowly trying to figure out a way to, do it reliably. So it'll just be like, oh yeah, these are like the 4 or 5 things that we actually need to know. It's a lot less step-by-step, where it's not like, click this button and then do this thing and then do that thing, and like here's a bunch of screenshots, because the depth and complexity of the SOPs need to match the understanding and skills of who you're paying to do that, essentially. So let's just say a Google Analytics audit, which probably most people listening are familiar with, at least analytics. If you have somebody who is a data analyst on your team, they are a senior data analyst, and they used to, they deal with data all day, every day. So you're that big of a company that you have an in-house data analyst. They don't need any sort of SOP. They are telling you what to do. They're doing their own thing. They just need like 3 to 5 bullet points, which is like, oh yeah, make sure that you go through, get these 5 bits of information because we need that for the proposal, and then tell us if there's anything else that you think is important, because they're going to know what that means. Whereas if you hire a VA that is fairly inexperienced, then you're going to need a really step-by-step thing, which is, okay, this is how you check to make sure that you're on the right property. Here's how you make sure you're on the right view. Here's where the admin button is. When you click on admin, so on and so forth. So you're going to need a lot more SOPs, and you're going to have to spend a lot more time on them. So depending on the actual team you have and how skilled they are and how familiar they are with what you're doing is going to depend on how detailed your SOPs need to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. So it's basically an inverse relationship between skill sets and SOPs, basically. So the more skilled your employees or VAs, whoever is working for you, the more detailed your SOPs have to be. So how long did these processes actually take to get set up? Because as I said, I'm in the process of that, and I've just realized that that is the business. And we'll dive into this a bit later as well. But like we were talking earlier about websites, and that everyone seems to think like, oh, the pretty website or the logo or the, the cool little online store and stuff, that's the business. But the business is actually in the SOPs in the back, instructing people to like take out your processes and that. So how long did it take you to actually set up all these SOPs? What you said you have like 50, 60 of them.
Sorry. So when I said 50, 60, what I was saying was that what I was hearing from others is that 50, 60 SOPs.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So right now I'm restructuring the entire process. Like historically, I have literally hundreds of them. Most of them are really outdated. Most of them are like, overly complex or really minute things. And what I'm doing now is trying to reduce that, where when I'm hopefully done, hopefully we won't have more than like, I'd say like 50 or 60 or so.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's just on the Google Ads side of things, and that's from the sales process to anybody closing. And then what we're going to have are basically going through that same exact process on the SEO side of things, and then probably going through that same exact process as for other things, like on marketing. Like right now, it just says like, oh, somebody becomes a lead through some sort of marketing that we're doing, but it doesn't define anything on the marketing side of things. So eventually that'll become a need to actually build out. But what I'm going through right now isn't taking a terrible amount of time, to be honest, mostly because I'm not going through and creating screenshots and then going into an image editor and like highlighting like, oh yeah, like click here and then 1 and 2. It's a lot of it's bullet points. It's just in a central location where if you have access to that slide deck, you have access to everything that we do, from somebody becoming a lead to somebody canceling their account in one central location. And that is going to make things a lot easier compared to what I had beforehand, which is essentially a spreadsheet with like a task name and a link to a thing. But that's just for that task where you couldn't visualize everything end to end, where the way that everything's detailed now is that we have that slide deck that goes through the entire process. Then you click on, let's say, the audit process. It opens up another slide, and then it has on there like, what is the importance of the audit process? What are we hoping to get? You click on an individual link, such as sending the video, because we do video audits. And then when you open up that video, that document, it just details out like, what needs to be in the video, like what do you need to go over, how long should that video be, just very simple bullet points. But it also says like, what's the actual goal of this? And so my goal with the SOPs is that the detail as to why we do it and the goal of it should be important enough that anybody can take that over and go, as long as I understand the purpose of this task, like everything under it can evolve over time. If we understand the goal of the video audit is to show our expertise and make it so that the client understands what we're talking about and not just sound like we're talking a foreign language to them, then anybody can take that and go, oh, you know what, we actually have never looked at this in this process, but I think it fits with the overall goal of what we're trying to do here. So that's essentially what I'm doing. It's not taking a ton of time because, again, it's pretty shorthand, pretty bullet pointed.
Yeah, sure. We're running on 25 minutes here, but I think the last point I just wanted to touch on was that before we got on the call, we were chatting a bit about how you restructured and you went from Bulldog Media,
Blue Dog Media to Comet Fuel.
yeah, to Comet Fuel, yeah, and how no one really cares. Clients don't really care. It's only really the business owners that care. Because I'm also currently restructuring from viral marketing to Ghost Rank, or Rank Ghost at the moment, and it's literally just same shit, different day. Could you maybe touch on that? Because I think a lot of guys watching this now are also like so obsessed with getting their website in order, so obsessed with getting logos and branding and all that stuff. And whilst that is important, it's not as important as your outreach methods and actually having clients in the door, and whatnot. So could you maybe chat a bit about that?
Yeah, so there's a couple points I'll make, specifically on the rebranding side of things. Actually going through that process, like most people don't care what your name is, especially for existing clients. As long as they don't have to like sign anything new or like whatever, all I had to do is be like, hey, by the way, I just sent an email to everybody, didn't personalize it at all, just BCC to everybody, said, hey, by the way, we're changing your name. Pretty soon you're going to email me at this email instead. We're going to be going through and just giving ourselves access to your accounts under our new emails. Anything that we don't have access to, we're going to just ask you to give us the right access level so that we can add our own accounts. So you might get a couple emails with this, but once that's done, it should be pretty straightforward. Nothing else is changing. It's still the same people. It's invoices are still coming from the same place, just gonna have a different logo on it. Pricing is staying the same. We're not going to charge you anything different, just so you know. And then like 3 or 4 people just responded like, awesome, that's so cool. And then everybody else was like, okay, whatever. And then invoices come in through a different email. Everybody paid whenever I asked for account information, which is kind of what I expected. Like I didn't expect anybody to care. I think people would care a lot more if you're like, oh, by the way, we just got acquired by another company. That's when people will start to care, because that's when, so that's when it's a new team or it's a new service offering. If you're restructuring your services, which over time we're going to be doing. And so what I wanted to make it as easy a transition as possible, where I know that I have an idea of where I want our, so our pricing of what we're pitching people nowadays is higher than what probably 40% of our PPC clients are on, because PPC has gone through the biggest rechange as of late. But they're legacy clients at this point. So we're not going to them and saying, hey, you need to pay us more. If they reach a certain point, we get to certain milestones, sure, we'll be like, hey, by the way, 3 months from now, our pricing is increasing to this. We'll either help you find a replacement for us over the course of those 3 months, or you have 3 months to decide if you want to pay us more, and then just give them ample time, and then whatever it may be. But clients don't really care. Now, on the point of websites, branding, et cetera, in general, what I did for what I did for Blue Dog Media is I just chose something off the top of my head, which is that with agencies, it's very common to have an animal and a color kind of combination. So I just chose that, went for it, mainly changed the name because there's 3 other Blue Dog Medias. When it came to Comet Fuel, what I did is I just went to a premium domain site.
Awesome name, by the way.
Yep. And I was like, it took me a couple months. I was looking for a name for a couple months, but I was like, okay, great. Here's like 10 names I think could work. Send it off to a couple people, got some ideas, created a list of like my top 3, and then bought it. I think it cost me like $2,500, like $3,000 for the domain. So it wasn't cheap for it, but I was really happy with it. And we have the funds because we were at a certain size where it just didn't matter. Like, okay, great. Like that name's going to pay for itself. It's going to be much more rememberable. It's a lot more easy to remember. I like it a lot more, etc. And we had like an actual theme around it. So I bought the domain and built it out. Now, when it comes to like logo, which technically Comet Fuel doesn't even have one, it's literally just the font that we use, Comet Fuel, bam. And then will there be a logo eventually? Maybe, I don't know. Or it could just stay text. When it comes to like the design and how everything feels, if you're just starting out, I mean, you do just need to, you can edit all that over time. I wouldn't make that the highest priority, but I would say I do put more value into it than most, being that there is a point, depending on the type of clients you're working with and depending on the size that you're pitching, there are certain expectations. So if you go into, let's say, a 5-star restaurant, you're trying to pitch, 5-star restaurant prices, and then you order a drink and they bring you out a red Solo cup and one of those plates that have like animal faces on it that you give to like children. And they're like, okay, great, here's your plate. There's, you can still functionally, you can eat food off of that, you can drink from that, but even though the pricing is negligible for those 2 items, the cost of the plate and the cost of the cup, you're still not going to feel as fully satisfied because there's a certain experience that you expect. And without taking a whole lot of time, essentially people are emotional beings, they're not logical beings. And so there's a reason why when you look at the colors black and gold, that signals luxury to you, and why you look at certain colors and that means certain things. So over time, the brandability and the design of everything became more important. Over time, it was really important for us to have a custom designed pitch deck in which it represents the brand. You'll notice that on the site, we don't have a whole lot of hard angles. Everything is curved off. So even on our proposals, there are no rectangles. They're all curved angles. When you go into design theory, I'm not a design person, but I sat down with a designer. And basically, So a lot of the stuff matters either consciously or subconsciously, but only at a certain point, where this is stuff that I didn't worry about for years. But over time, some people will, do have certain expectations, and it does make things a little bit easier, but it's not going to be the difference between, 0 to, 10,000. It might be the difference between 20 and 50,000.
Yeah. Okay. So what would you say to the guy that's just starting off in this space? SEO, pay-per-click, Facebook ads, whatever they decide route to take with their digital agency. What would be your number one outreach method? I mean, you get there's lots of camps of thought here. There's the organic, then there's paid, then there's cold calling, then there's cold emailing, and then there's guys that are saying that's all stupid. You just need testimonials, and then guys that say work for free. What's kind of your stance there for the 16-year-old that wants to build a big agency up one day?
I'm a big fan of doing whatever you feel as though seems right. That's one thing that once I started ignoring everybody else in the space, I started making progress a lot faster. And so, I mean, which is, the dichotomy of that is funny, because now I'm also telling people, my opinion, while also saying that you shouldn't listen to my opinion, which is fine.
But I think it's true. It's true. You need to go down your path. That's what I believe in.
Yeah.
You need to go through the process. I might be good on the phone. You might be good with ads or email or getting testimonials. So
you just need to, find your strength. There's going to be pros and cons to everything. So personally, if I were to get started again, what I would probably do is I would probably initially get started on sites similar to Upwork or Upwork itself to get some money in the door. I would also, if I was starting day one, if I didn't have any prior experience, I would also work for an agency, to be honest. That's going to, or even if it's white label work and they're just contracting out work to you, then you don't have to worry about client acquisition. And then on the other side of things, I would focus on producing content, because what has worked for us is that we don't really have a sales process as much as it's someone wants to reach out to us and we say, okay, great. Go listen to some of the podcasts that I've done. Go read some of the stuff that we wrote. If you're still interested, okay, great, let's jump on a discovery call. Or they're already coming from that. They found me somewhere, then they looked at that. So that would be really important for me. So I would start pushing out some content at the same time to work on the inbound sort of stuff. I've done cold emailing before. Certain niches is going to be a lot easier than others. It also depends on your pricing. Usually it's going to be people that you're going to find lower pricing, lower retention rates, so on and so forth. Yes, you can get, $5,000 a month clients from it. However, the expectations, the trust, and the retention is going to be low because of that, where you have no trust with somebody because they've never heard of you beforehand, and then you're just essentially reaching out. Even if you go through an initial non-salesy process, you're still they still have very little trust or information about you. And so to me, what I found was that was mostly a waste of time, primarily due to the retention rate. Whereas for us, anybody that cancels in under a year is usually something went wrong in that process, just for how we do things. And so for us, that has been mostly content, because we need a high level of trust for the pricing and timelines that we give to people, but also the expectations that we have for them as well. So it's really dependent on what you're comfortable with, but also the types of clients that you actually want. I'm a big proponent in working for an agency first, because there's so much you're going to learn, especially even if you're on a contractor basis, or even if you're like, hey, I'll do sales for an agency and work on a commission basis or hourly basis, whatever it may be. You're going to learn so much faster. And you're going to have only 1/10 of the responsibilities compared to once you're out on your own. And so I think that was really invaluable for me.
Awesome. Sure. Well, we're about to hit 35 minutes. So I'm going to have to call it here. But bro, I could chat to you for hours about this stuff. I've got so much to learn from you, and I'm pretty sure our listeners and everyone also, like, there's so much they can learn about you. Where can they reach you if they want to reach out, or where can we get hold of you?
Yeah, so you can find me personally on LinkedIn, or you can go to cometfuel.com.
Awesome. And I think you also have a YouTube channel, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yes, I do. I always forget about it. It's just Jarod Spiewak on YouTube, which I'm trying to push out more content on.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll hold you to that. I'll be messaging you in like a day, asking where's the latest video.
Well,
Awesome.
I as a prelude, I do have a very interesting video that I'm working on that I don't think anybody else has put out within the agency space for. So I'll see. We'll see how that goes. I'm not sure if I'm going to brand it agency specific or keep it a little bit more broad, but we do use it, and I haven't seen anybody else in the agency space put out content on it.
When's that
Could
dropping?
be wrong, but that's always a good question. I thought last week, so.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thanks, Jarod. I really appreciate it, man. And I really want to get you on again, because I think we were just scratching the surface of what can be done in the space, and all that. I really want to go into those SOPs of yours. That would be crazy, just to hear like the finer details, your automation. I'm assuming you're a big Zapier guy or Integromat guy.
Don't use
Neither.
either a whole lot. A lot of what I do is either through app scripts, which is just JavaScript, or Python.
Python. Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks, Jarod. Again, I really appreciate it. And we're going to chat soon. Cool. Cheers, guys.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.